Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I am Mr. Alejandro Villalba, and I will serve as your Master of Ceremonies for today's event. Before we begin the program, I'd like to recognize and acknowledge the tremendous talents of the Wright Brass Ensemble, which is a derivative of the Air Force Band of Flight. So, folks, wonderful job. Thank you so much. Welcome to everyone to the National Museum of the United States Air Force. This morning, as we enter Memorial Day weekend, we pause our daily lives to honor those who have dedicated their lives to serving our great nation and its citizens. At this time, I ask that everyone please stand for the presentation of colors by the Wright-Patterson Air Force Base Honor Guard, and please remain standing for the playing of the national anthem by the Wright Brass Ensemble of the Air Force Band of Flight. Thank you. Please be seated. We gratefully would like to thank all of the Air Force and community leaders who have joined us today. And we extend a special thanks to a few that are with us this morning. First and foremost, United States Air Force Lieutenant General retired Jack Hudson, the Director of the National Museum of the United States Air Force. Sir. And we also have with us this morning Ms. Krista Strider, Deputy Director, National Museum of the United States Air Force. Today's ceremony is hosted by the Air Force Museum Foundation, the philanthropic corporation that funds facility expansions and program support for the National Museum of the U.S. Air Force. Representing the foundation with us this morning are Colonel Retired Susan Richardson, President of the Board of Trustees, Air Force Museum Foundation. And also Mr. Mike Imhoff, Executive Director, Air Force Museum Foundation. We have a few guest speakers with us this morning. The first will be Air Force Lieutenant General Retired Jack Hudson, Air Force Colonel Retired Susan Richardson, also Mr. Stephen Frame, System Architect and Engineer, Sage Management and Executor Company, and finally, Air Force Colonel Retired Dennis Crouch, past President of the Military Officers Association of America, Dayton Area Chapter, and past President of the Ford Air Controllers Association. So if we could please all recognize our guest speakers. We also recognize the support of Ed Smith Flowers and Gifts, and also the Oakwood Florist for the donation of flowers used in today's ceremony. Following the ceremony, guests will be encouraged to come to the front of the event area to place flowers at the data plate wall. And finally, on the occasion of this solemn Memorial Day weekend, we extend a very special thank you to all the veterans who are with us here today. In addition, we would also like to recognize all the individuals who have traveled a great distance to be here today. We thank you for your support and your presence with us this morning. At this time, I would like to invite Father Kreitzer to give us our invocation. Father Kreitzer.
Creator of all, we remember before you with grateful hearts all those who are honored by this legacy data plate wall, as well as all the men and women of our country who in the day of decision ventured much for the liberties that we now enjoy. Grant that we may not rest until all the people of this land share the benefits of true freedom and gladly accept its disciplines. We commend to your gracious care and keeping all the men and women of our armed forces at home and abroad. Defend them day by day with your heavenly grace. Strengthen them in their trials and temptations. Give them courage to face the perils which beset them, and grant them a sense of your abiding presence wherever they may be. In your holy name we pray. Amen.
I forgot to mention that Father Kreitzer is of St. Mark's Episcopal Church, so Father, thank you for being with us today. Thank you so much. On the back of today's program, you will find the names of the individuals and organizations that were added to the Wall of Honor in the past year. And while not all of them could be represented at the podium today, the resounding message is that the men and women memorialized on this wall are truly amazing, and the world and our nation is a better place because of their significant contributions. I'd like to introduce our first speaker for today, who is Air Force Lieutenant General Retired Jack Hudson. Lieutenant General Hudson retired from the United States Air Force in 2009, and in his 36 years of active duty, he held a variety of positions, including T-38 instructor pilot, A-10 pilot, instructor pilot and flight examiner, and test pilot. He last served as the commander of the Aeronautical Systems Center at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base and is the current director of the National Museum of the United States Air Force. Please help me welcome Lieutenant General Hudson. Sir.
Well, Susan and Mike and ladies and gentlemen, welcome. It's great to have you here today. On behalf of our staff, almost 96, and our 550 or so volunteers, welcome. It's great to have you all here. Well, we're off to a great start today. The rain held off, at least so far. The sun's out there somewhere. We have Memorial Day in a few days, which gives us an occasion every year to think about and give thanks to those who gave their lives in military service to our nation. This year is also the 70th anniversary of the founding of our United States Air Force as an independent service. Now, airmen go back many years before that in the Army Air Forces, the Air Corps, the Air Service before that, and all the way back over 100 years. So a special year this is for the 70th anniversary of the founding of our United States Air Force. So here at the museum we have a motto, and it goes like this: we are the keepers of their stories. Now, we have a number of ways that we do that, and that motto is very good because it describes what we have done in the past, what we do today, and what we will continue to do in the future. So to accomplish that we are the keepers of their stories, we have the main complex over here with all the buildings and the galleries going back to the early years, all the way back to the Wright brothers, World War II, and then the next building with Korea and Southeast Asia, and the next building with the Cold War, all 224,000 square feet, and then the fourth building, which in a few days will have its one-year anniversary of being open, which has 4 galleries in it: the Research and Development Gallery, Presidential, Global Reach, and Space. And then we have the 3 classrooms in there, or our 3 STEM learning nodes that we use for educational outreach programs. So that's one way. Another way is our Memorial Park down that way, and all that is in there with plaques and benches and all the recognition with the memorials. And we have things close by here too, with the benches lined up here and back on the main walkway over there. We have a marvelous website. We have an air park out to the side closest to Area B. And there are other things we do as well, all to help us be the keepers of their stories. But yet there's one more, and that's the Legacy Data Plate Wall of Honor just behind me and in front of you. So we're in the 6th time that we do this ceremony, and it continues to grow both in terms of number of panels and number of names. And it's always something I try to make sure that I point out to folks I take through about this, and how lucky we are that we have the ability to do this under the eaves and along the wall, and so it's in plain view and visible. And our foundation has made this happen, so Susan and Mike and all the others who did this, we are so thankful that you pulled this project off and it continues to grow and expand. And so many people have a personal stake in this. I do as well. Right behind me, data plate number 89 is my father, who served in World War II in the Army Air Forces. And number 90 right below that is my wife's dad, who served in the Army in World War II. So 89 and 90 right behind me. And so many people have great stories like that. It really makes this an impressive part of the we are the keepers of their stories that we attempt to accomplish. And it helps us do our overall mission of telling the Air Force story to the public and inspiring our young people toward our Air Force and toward science, technology, engineering, and math. And today, I thought it was very special. I have a Prop and Wings insignia on my lapel, and Prop and Wings is what the Academy cadets wear. And in my day back there, they were all silver. But what they do now, and that's why I have this on today, is if a cadet has an ancestor or a close relative that served in the Air Force or the Army Air Forces or preceding organization of airmen, the Prop and Wings is gold and silver. So that's why mine is that way in honor of my father, who served in World War II. So what a great event this is. Thank you all for being here, for helping us as a whole to recognize and honor all those individually and as groups who are on the Legacy Data Plate Wall of Honor. Thanks for being here today, and I hope you have a great day after we're done here. We're really honored with your presence here. Thank you.
Thank you, General Hudson. Our next speaker is Air Force Colonel Retired Susan Richardson. Colonel Richardson retired from the Air Force in 2005. She served 26 years as an aerospace physiologist, and she is the president of the Board of Trustees of the Air Force Museum Foundation and is a volunteer here at the National Museum of the United States Air Force. Please help me welcome Colonel Richardson.
You have no idea how many times when I've been introduced that someone cannot pronounce aerospace physiology. I've been called a lot of different things. So, good morning. It's so neat to see so many of you here. Each year, they add more chairs, and each year we outnumber the chairs that they put out, and that's really wonderful to see. But I'm here to welcome you on part of the Air Force Museum Foundation, the board, but also the staff and their volunteers. And I have the honor of telling the story of our data plates. Because you know that most museums you go to have bricks where they honor people, but it's so appropriate that the National Museum of the U.S. Air Force that we have data plates. This has a wonderful history itself because this dates back to the beginning of military aviation. In World War I, airplanes were made out of cloth and wood, and if they crashed, they burnt beyond recognition. And it was determined that there needed to be a method for designating that plane. Something had to survive, so they knew what the aircraft they'd lost. And so each airplane was given its own data plate. And that data plate was unique to that aircraft. And what we've done here at the National Museum is given people an opportunity to have a unique story of a special individual to them. And this represents someone's hero, someone's mentor, someone's father, grandfather, or grandmother. Here, just a few of my examples. My father, a Korean War pilot. My son is here. Several of my fellow volunteers are here, and my favorite teacher. He was my 8th grade English teacher, and later when I met him as an adult, I found out he was a World War II medic. Who knew, right? My best friend's father's here too. He was a B-36 mechanic. Who knew? But I will tell you, all these stories that are on this wall are also on the website. You really should visit the website because you get to see the data plate, and many of the families have put up a picture, and then they have a few paragraphs to tell why this individual was so special to them. And so I encourage you to visit that website and see that. And I want to point out, too, these aren't all Air Force people up here. These aren't even all military people up here. These are heroes that are special to people that they want to honor, and we are proud to have them here. Well, I do want to recognize those people that have data plates on this wall, and I'd like for you to stand, and the families and the friends of those people that have data plates here. If you'd please stand and be recognized, I would appreciate it. Look at all of these people. Thank you so much for sharing your stories with us, and have a good day at the National Museum of the U.S. Air Force.
Thank you, Colonel Richardson. And you put it in such a fine manner, because for those of us who have worked in aviation, and especially around aircraft, you know that the data plate, and there's only one data plate generally on an aircraft, and that is the identity of that aircraft. Much like American warriors wear dog tags. We wear dog tags because that's our identity. And these data plates today will symbolize the data plate and the identity of the heroes that we recognize today. So what an amazing analogy. This is truly an amazing place. Our next speaker is Mr. Stephen Frame. He's a member of Sage Management and Exetor Company and is employed at Wright-Patterson as a systems architect and engineer. He is a part of a team integrating Air Force reconnaissance sensors into national architectures. After graduating from Case Western Reserve University in 1983, he moved to Dayton in 1995 when he was detailed to the Air Force to assist with the development of sensors for the Global Hawk aircraft. He retired from government service in 2011, but continues to work at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. He now lives in Clayton with his wife Penny, and his two sons have both settled in the area. So let us please welcome Mr. Stephen Frame, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Vilova. Hello, everybody, and thank you for supporting this great museum. What I want to tell you about today is my plaque about my father, John Frame. Now, his plaque reads, John H. Frame, co-founder, Air Force Museum Foundation, 1926 to 2016. Now, Dad didn't have a long career in the services. In fact, he served just 4 years. But it speaks to the strength and integrity of the service that those few years did a lot to define everything he did in his future life and brought him back to this spot to found the Air Force Museum. Dad served in the Army Air Corps in the closing days of World War II. The way he tells the story, two of his major passions he found very early on in his training. He was still in basic training when the sergeant fixed him with a steely gaze and said, "Recruit, take that Jeep over there and deliver these papers to headquarters. Be back in 15 minutes. Now, my dad was a poor kid from inner city Indianapolis, and I don't think he'd been in a car that much, but he did his best. He stepped in the Jeep, he wiggled this and stepped on that and took off for headquarters. When he got back with time to spare, he was very proud of himself and reported back to his sergeant. And the sergeant said, "Son, have you ever driven a car before?" And Dad said, well, no, I haven't. What, did I do something wrong? And the sergeant said, well, you should be taking that turn there at about 15 miles an hour, and you were doing about 45. Now, later in the 50s and 60s, he spent a lot of time in sports cars racing all over the Midwest. Some of my happiest childhood memories are camping at Mid-Ohio or Nelson Ledges race course while Dad raced a weekend. Of course, when he was 89 and he was still taking corners at 45 that he should have been taking at 15, I kind of wish that sergeant had sent somebody else, and I think his insurance agent felt the same way. After the basic, Dad was placed as the enlisted air crew in a B-29, the radio operator, in fact. I guess he had a good voice for the radio operator's position, and he had the typing skills to do the logs for the missions. After his service in the 50s, he turned that radio voice, that typing skills, and a natural curiosity into a career in journalism. Radio journalism for most of his career, although he was nominated for the Pulitzer 3 times for his newspaper column work. In fact, for most of my growing up, he was the top-rated disc jockey in my hometown. Did your parents ever have something they would do to punish you and what you did is kind of dumb? For me, he'd simply tell all of Central Ohio about it. He came to Dayton in 1956 as the news director for a small AM radio station. As an Army Air Corps veteran and news director, he was given a tour of the nascent Air Force Museum. He realized that more could be done to protect these vital parts of our national heritage. He got together with 2 other Army Air Corps veterans, C. Frank Scarborough and James F. Barnhart, and founded the Air Force Museum Foundation. Now, careers in news media tend to make you move around a lot. Dad was moved out of Dayton not just a few years after he started the foundation. But I can still remember the family trips back here to see the museum. I was always amazed at the beautiful machines, the gorgeous facility, and the dedication of the people who operated and worked those machines. As the museum grew and as I took a career supporting the military services of the United States, I was increasingly aware that we were a small link in a long chain of stories that made these Air Force memories worth keeping. Really, this whole wall is a series of stories of people who saw the need of what needed to be done and stepped up to the challenges that faced them. Not too long ago, I was having lunch with a friend, and he pointed out that a lot of people can look at a situation and say, somebody needs to do something about that. Dad was the kind of person who said, I can do something about that. In fact, this wall, this whole museum, and the Air Force are monuments to people who say, I will do something about that. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Frame, and thank you for sharing personal stories about your father and his impact on the museum and the foundation as a whole. Thank you so much. Our last speaker is Colonel Retired Dennis Crouch. He's our keynote speaker and entered the Air Force in August of 1962. He served as a pilot, a test pilot, and his service fields included operations, research and development, acquisition, and logistics. He has flown over 25 aircraft and has accumulated over 4,000 flying hours, including 675 combat hours. After his retirement in 1989, he continued to work in program management, business development, and weapons systems acquisition in support of Air Force programs until his official retirement in 2006. He remains an active member of the community in his leadership roles with nonprofits. Let us please welcome Colonel Crouch. Sir.
General Hudson, ladies and gentlemen, it is a real pleasure to be here today. This is a wonderful day. We've got beautiful blue skies out here, I see, and I think we're all wondering if that was going to happen, but it surely did. What a day to have the Wall of Honor dedication ceremony. It's a great day. First, I want to thank all of you for being here today. What a wonderful day to remember those who gave of themselves in the support of our great country. As we approach Memorial Day, there is not a more befitting time to conduct this Wall of Honor dedication ceremony and to recognize many of those who have been remembered, should be remembered, and will be remembered forever. It serves not only those we choose to remember, but it keeps their stories alive. And the National Museum of the United States Air Force, as General Hutchin mentioned, is the place where the stories our people are told and retold and retold. I've had the honor and pleasure of adding several Wall of Honor data plates. I have 3 uncles, 1 aunt, served with the Navy in World War II, my stepfather, who served in the Army in World War II, and my son, who served in Desert Storm. I was also privileged to support my Dedalians organization, Flight 9 at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, which was initially a group of World War I pilots. It's a pilot fraternity at that time, World War I pilots, that has grown and expanded. And it's much different now in that it's grown. It has commissioned officers and warrant officers in any component of our armed services, whoever is a pilot, a navigator, a flight surgeon, or an astronaut, and many other specialties as well. I was proud to lead the effort to add the data plates for the Military Officers Association of America, both the Dayton area chapter and the Ohio Consulate chapters, in honor of their service to our nation and their continued service to our military and our local communities. Each have an important and deserving place on this exceptional Wall of Honor. My beloved relatives, Dedalians and the Moa brothers and sisters that I have, are very deserving of this place, and they enjoy this remarkable wall. None of my relatives are famous. They're everyday people. But they were wonderful people who signed on that dotted line saying that they would give all for their country and for our freedom. The freedom that you and I enjoy today. And they gave us the legacy that we must carefully nurture and guard forever. These data plates are an important way to provide remembrance for others and to understand the importance of that legacy. All my elder blood brothers served in the Pacific Theater in World War II, and my stepfather served in Europe at the same time, and my son served in Desert Storm. Their names briefly: L.G. Crawl, Harold Crawl, Louis Crouch, Gertrude Crouch, and Rufus Tyree, and my son, Brad Crouch. I'd like to tell a couple of very short stories on 2 of my relatives. My uncle Harold Crawl, Bub as we called him, entered the service as a young 17-year-old, and his mother, my grandmother, right beside him to allow him to enlist in World War II. He became a corpsman. Because the Marines had no corpsmen of their own, He was attached to a Marine unit in the Pacific Theater. He was in many battles, and as we slugged our way through the Pacific Islands until finally the war was over and we had won. Bub came home after that war, after serving his duty as a corpsman. When I remember that I was about 8 or 9 years old at the time when he came home, and he stayed with us for quite a while with my mom and dad at that time. I recall in the darkened night, his screaming as he tried to sleep. My mom told me he also had had malaria. That was a little too much for me as a young 8 or 9-year-old person to understand, a young lad. Bub had a difficult time the rest of his life. Battle fatigue was the word that we used then. We hadn't invented PTSD at this time. He gave almost everything. He was a good man, and my dad taught him a craft as a printer, which gave him a good livelihood. But he never got over those times in the Pacific. He was among the thousands, and I'm sure that they all deserve our respect and admiration. The Wall of Honor is in remembrance and respect for what he did and what they all did. My mother married my stepfather, Rufus Tyree, some years after my dad passed away. Rufus told me he was in the Army in World War II, but he wouldn't say anything else. I had no idea what he did or where he did it. I questioned him whenever I had the chance, but he remained silent. Then I bought the series that we've all seen, or most of us have seen, called The Band of Brothers. And he was interested in watching it. So I showed it. He showed a fascination with it, and it sparked many memories that he had buried over the years, not unlike many of our veterans from that era, or perhaps the era of today. As Rufus and I were watching one episode, when George Patton's Third Army was striking across Europe in an attempt to reach the surrounded 101st Airborne, then it was commanded, if you remember, by Brigadier General Anthony McAuliffe. As you may recall, General McAuliffe had refused to surrender at the Battle of the Bulge by replying to the German surrender request by saying that infamous word, nuts. That was the end of it. We were going to continue to resist. We will never surrender. Rufus was intently watching the film, and I noted his eyes started to light up as an M3 half-track rolled across the TV screen. I watched him. A huge vehicle, the M3 is a huge vehicle with normal front wheels and a tank-like tread on elongated rear wheels. All of a sudden, Rufus shouted out as he pointed at the TV screen, "That's what I did when I was in war. That's what I did when I was in the 3rd General Patton's Army. That's what I did." He went on and on like that just to tell me. It's the first time I'd heard him say anything like that. His eyes were bright and he was full of life. And he relived his days as a gunner on that M3 half-track that was so prevalent in World War II. He talked about his job as a .50 caliber gunner on that half-track. What a thrilling experience. I finally knew what he was willing to talk about in those few moments, and he also said, "I loved General Patton." I'll never forget that word, and we've all seen that movie, and he says, "I loved General Patton." Yes, the Wall of Honor is a wonderful place to give credit and remembrance to those we want to honor, and I haven't stopped yet. You know, many of us say that we wouldn't have succeeded at all, or very little, without the continued support of our spouses. That's certainly true for myself. The Air Force got 2 for 1 when we came into the service, and many of you can certainly relate to that. Ann Crouch has been my reason to be and my motivation in nearly everything. Everything I've done, and she continues to do so. Ann has made herself second many times over, while ensuring her support for me and our family. I'm sure many of you feel the same. Yes, I'm going to put her on that wall. She's not there now, but she deserves to be, and I'm sure many of your spouses do as well. Thank you, honey. I hope you continue to recognize the many that are so deserving to be placed on this wonderful wall of honor. They need to be celebrated by family and friends. Thank you so much for allowing me to speak to you. Please remember that all served as we celebrate Memorial Day, and give thanks to all those who gave some and to all those who gave their all. God bless you. God bless America. Have a wonderful day. Thank you.
Thank you, Colonel Crouch. And you epitomize keeping your family's history alive, and I think that's why everyone is here today, because we want to remember, we want to epitomize those individuals who made a contribution to our nation and our service and the citizens as a whole. So thank you for epitomizing why this wall is behind us. And I thank all of the four speakers who spoke to us today. Thank you so much for your time and for your words of inspiration. Ladies and gentlemen, at this time, I invite all of you to stand as the bugler from the Right Brass Ensemble will play for us taps. During the sounding of taps, it is customary for military members in uniform to render a salute and for civilians to place their right hand over their heart. What a beautiful rendition of taps by the sergeant. Thank you so much for your skill and your talent. On behalf of the Air Force Museum Foundation Board of Trustees, we thank all of you for attending the 2017 Legacy Data Plate Wall of Honor Tribute Ceremony. We hope all of you have a safe and happy Memorial Day weekend as we gather with our families and friends in our local communities. Let us not forget the true meaning and purpose of this solemn holiday: to honor and remember those Americans in military service who served and sacrificed to ensure freedom for all Americans, in that we may freely embrace life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. For more information on the Legacy Data Plate program, or to view stories of those honored here today, please visit the membership desk in the main atrium or log on to the Legacy Data Plate website. At the conclusion of our two closing songs, we invite all of our guests to come forward to view the Wall of Honor, share stories of these honored Americans, and place flowers on the wall. We conclude today's ceremony with two songs performed by the Right Brass Ensemble of the Air Force Band of Flight. They will play the Air Force song, followed by the Armed Forces Salute. for the right brass ensemble of the Air Force Band of Flight. Wonderful job. Thank you so much for being with us today. Again, ladies and gentlemen, thank you all for attending, and may God bless our nation, its citizens, and those who have served in uniform to defend her. Thank you and good afternoon.